Many of us are, of course, familiar with anti-Semitism, be it the recent wave of it, and to many historians, the worst kind during the Nazi German regime of Hitler. But some of you might even go back to the Polish uh, ghettos of the 1800s in Europe. We might even go back all the way to the Inquisition, or even some of you might go back to the medieval times, the anti-Semitism there in Europe as well. But many don't know that the origins of what it's called deicide or parricide, which means killing God, dates back to the early Christians and their persecution of Jews. So I'd like to show you here a history of violence by some early Christian writers. This is from the 2nd century Melito. The God has been murdered. The king of Israel has been put to death by an Israelite right hand. And this is Emperor Constantine, who became the first quote-unquote Christian emperor in the 4th century. He says, we may no more have anything in common with those parricides, that is, parent or father killers, sometimes also mother killer, and the murderers of our Lord. We have no single point in common with the perjury of the Jews. Now, you might be thinking this is an odd term, perhaps, deicide or parricide, an certainly odd meaning of killing God, but it makes sense because many early Christians believed that Jesus was literally God, the only true God, as the Nicene Chalcedon Creed later went on to say, and as the later Christian emperors like Justinian and Theodosian enforced by the power of the state onto all Christians. So it doesn't come as a surprise if you think about it that the Jews at that time were regarded as parricides or deicides. We have another one here from the 5th century. The Jews have committed outrages against God himself. They crucified him. Also, later on, quote, envy made the Jews deicides or God killers. Another thing to remember about these terms and what they mean is that it reflects one of the earliest heresies of the Christian movement, of the Christian faith, and that's something called patripassianism. So if you can Google that, P-A-T-R-I, patripassianism, and that simply is a term meaning that the God, or God the Father specifically, suffered and died. But here, this early Orthodox, sort of proto-Orthodox Christians, an early form of Catholic dogma, later Catholic Protestant, believed that it was the Son of God who took on flesh somehow, and that's how he suffered and died. Just to close up, this is anti-Semitism, myth and hate from antiquity to the present. The writers say, quote, ultimately, all anti-Semitic accusations and justifications for persecution and discrimination spring from that primal act of deicide. I think the writers here mean the crucifixion of Jesus. In the words of the Catholic biblical exegete Crossan, quote, the Passion Resurrection stories are the matrix for Christian anti-Judaism and eventually for European anti-Semitism. That without that Christian anti-Judaism, lethal and genocidal European anti-Semitism would have been either impossible or at least not widely successful. And this is from Crossan's book, Who Killed Jesus? And the last quote here from the same book, quote, This episode, comments the historian Grant, shows what happens to theology when it is divorced from history. Almost every Christian writer in the first 5 centuries of the church wrote an anti-Jew treatise or made anti-Judaism a principal theme of other writings.